Okay, we're going to turn now to some financial matters. Rob?
All right, this is what Phil called one of my eat your broccoli questions. Politicians love to spend money. That's why we have enormous debt problems with the federal government. Federal debt that's about $40 trillion, by far the highest it's ever been. Annual deficits of about $2 trillion. The debt is just exploding. The experts say it is not sustainable and that this is the most predictable crisis in American history. It's not going to end well. Shenna Bellows, what specific steps would you take as a senator to address the deficit?
Stop spending money on things that the billionaires and the massive corporations want, like endless war, and trying to create urgency and panic so we fall for it, and start spending money on the things that matter for folks at home. Because having served in the state Senate, I saw firsthand. You know, when I won a district that voted for Trump and voted for me in 2016, I didn't hide that I was head of the ACLU or a leader on marriage equality, but I knocked on 10,075 doors, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, and I asked them, what matters most to you? And the one thing that unites us is people want to keep their kids fed and make sure that everybody gets health care and fund our schools. But the powerful tell us there's not enough. Well, if we ended the war in Iran, I guess we could have universal child care for all, not just in Maine, but across the country.
Troy Jackson?
Well, I've definitely been involved in doing a bunch of balanced budgets here in Maine legislature. But if we want to balance the federal budget, the way to do that is to quit giving massive income tax cuts to people like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and start taxing wealthy people, I mean really wealthy people like none of us actually know the right way. I mean, this is insane. I mean, we used to have a tax rate that was fair, that wealthy people paid their fair share. Now we're giving tax breaks so that they're not paying anything at all, and the rest of us are picking up the tab. That has to change. I mean, that is the fundamental problem in this country, is that wealthy, I mean, insane. Look how many billionaires that we have now in this country that are not paying any taxes, and that is really what I think would be the way to balance our budget.
Nirav Shah?
You know, Rob, every time there's a question about the deficit, it's usually quickly accompanied by this idea that there's just not enough money. And that's why we've got to worry about the deficit, because we've got to be judicious. Rob, I just don't buy it. The fact of the matter is, every single time we're told there's not enough money for rural hospitals in Maine, or for Medicare for underprivileged folks, or for universal child care, we see those very same folks are doing things like Susan Collins has done, like approving $70 billion with the B dollars in spending for a rogue agency like ICE. So every time someone tells me there's not enough money, I don't think they're really serious about the deficit. I just think they're hiding behind some easy political preferences. In this case, if that $70 billion could have absolutely resurrected the rural hospital system in Maine. Instead, it was spent on a rogue agency that killed somebody on Monday. All that said, what else can we do? The war in Iran is thought to be costing $1 billion per day. What could we do for the social good with that money? To say nothing of corruption. Republicans like to talk about corruption. Democrats need to start talking about it more too, because there's a lot of savings, and that money, again, can be used for the social good.
Jordan Wood?
It's a really important question, because this is one reason I think we really need generational change. My entire life, this is what the federal spending has looked like since the Bush-Iraq war, and both parties are part of it. And I've heard politicians say, you know, I don't want my grandkids to have to pay for this. I mean, my 18-month-old daughter is going to be paying for this. What I think we need to do is a wealth tax. I mean, we have not raised taxes on the wealthy and corporations in our country since Citizens United. And when I talk about corruption, this is what I mean, is that we have a Supreme Court and a political system that gives all the power to the wealthy and corporations, and there's a reason that their tax rates have not gone up. But voters know this from me, from the town halls I've had all over the state. We need historic tax reform that makes the wealthiest pay their fair share. But I also think we need to be very serious about cutting spending. When I graduated high school, our federal budget was half of what it is today. I have not met a single person that thinks our government works twice as good as it did when I was graduating high school. So there needs to be real reform to get a more efficient government that works for people.
All right, let me get to the second part of the broccoli question. Different funding, but Social Security is also facing a financial cliff. The trustees of the system say that it will not be able to make its payments by 2032. That would be before the end of your first term in the United States Senate. That means that tens of thousands of Mainers, if nothing is done, would not receive their full checks. To address the problem, you either raise the retirement age, you raise the cap on Social Security taxes, you increase Social Security taxes in general, or you reduce benefits. What specifically would you do, Troy Jackson?
Well, I'm never going to raise the retirement age. I think that's really unfair for people. But I definitely scrapping the cap, make it so that, again, wealthy people pay at the same rate that the rest of us do. Once I believe it gets to $120,000, they don't have to pay anymore. I mean, they should be paying their fair share and making sure that people have the social safety network that Social Security provides. And that's something that, I'll definitely fight for. I mean, we've seen the federal government actually help bail out pensions across, this country. We can do this and make sure that, lower income people that have worked all their lives, get the benefit of Social Security. And the way we're going to do that is actually scrapping the cap.
Dr. Shah?
Social Security is one of the crown jewels of our social security net, or social safety net in the United States. Of course, the original idea came from a Mainer, of course. One of the things that we have a solemn obligation to maintain is that pact that we've made with so many Americans, whether that's through Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, or the other entitlements that people rely upon. Right now, as you said, Social Security is facing insolvency, and one of the things that's really unfair is that if you are a millionaire, your input into the system, your contribution, is the same as somebody making $50,000 or $180,000 a year. So yes, we should absolutely scrap the cap so that people at every single income level are putting additional funding into the system. A lot of the projections that are out there say that by lifting the cap or scrapping it altogether, we could very quickly return the program to solvency. That's what we have to do. Now, I want to be clear. We have to make sure that on the other side, when those millionaires retire, we've got the funding there. And so what I think we ought to do is both lift the cap and then cap benefits, so that your overall benefit when you retire isn't based on your last salary. There's a cap on it, so we don't end up bankrupting the system. We can do both, lift the cap and then cap benefits for the billionaires.
Just to be clear, the cap that's in effect now is a cap that means that people who make about $180,000 don't have to pay Social Security taxes after that. It's not $50,000.
No, agreed. It's $184,000. I would lift it so that no matter what your income is, you have to pay into the Social Security. I just want to make sure.
I just wanted to clarify that. I want to move on. Jordan Wood, your answer.
Yeah, this is such an important issue, and I feel at town halls it comes up every time. When we think about the big challenges that our country faces, I think about also the big things we've accomplished. And we did a great step for elderly people in poverty by creating this system. And it is a commitment that we make, and we need to maintain it. But it is another problem that since I was young, I've been told, I'm not sure Social Security is going to be there when you're an adult, when you're retiring. That's unacceptable. We need to make it work. It's called the 2100 Act. It would eliminate the cap. But I actually think we need to think about more serious reforms that even break out a three-tier bracket. So actually the wealthiest people in this country are going to have the tax that they pay increased and lower it for the lowest income people. Because I can tell you, when I had my first job making $30,000 a year, and I was living on credit card debt because I could not afford rent, I couldn't afford food, transportation, but we were still being charged, still paying taxes into a system that we were being told it wasn't going to be there. So I think we need to look at big reforms to this. But I also think we got to increase the benefit. I think there should be a new COLA that represents the actual cost of living for seniors.
All right, Shenna Bellows.
There's a story that's been told for a long time, and that's there's not enough money in Washington. Not enough for universal child care, not enough for universal health care, not enough for Social Security, it's going to run out. And that resonates with people who grew up like Troy and I did. Because I've lived a lot of my life feeling like there's never enough or I'm never enough. I'm going to run out. If you know what it's like, you know what I mean. And quite frankly, according to the stats, most Mainers feel that way now. And we don't need to quibble over whether it's $180,000 or $184,000 because The truth of the matter is, we just saw the country's first trillionaire.
All right, I'm going to jump in because you've
Sure.
gone 35 seconds and you didn't give me any specifics. Give me
Yes,
specific
scrap the
steps
cap.
that you would take.
Scrap the cap. And what that means is make sure the trillionaires pay the same percentage of wages as working class people.
Just to follow up Rob's whole line of questioning, all of you have talked about certain taxes. You mentioned cutting certain spending, but I didn't hear anything specific. We know President Trump is now proposing a $1.5 trillion defense budget for the next fiscal year. Is that something you would cut? Maybe if we just went down the line, can you name one program, despite what you just said, there's enough money to go around, it's about priorities, but are there any programs that you would seek to cut spending given we have a $2 trillion a year budget deficit and a $39 trillion debt? Shenna, let's just start with you.
I would end the war in Iran right now, because every time the newspaper prints a new figure, it's shocking.
Troy Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, the war in Iran, ICE, I mean, it's all money, but the biggest thing for me is that we're not taking in the money that we should from wealthy people, and that's why we have such a big deficit.
Nirav Shah, spending you would cut?
Right now, there's an amendment before Congress that would cut $3.3 billion in funding that would go in service, or that is now funding the genocide that's occurring in Gaza. Right off the top, that's $3 billion that could be spent on food for hungry kids.
And Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I think there should be an audit of Pentagon spending, and I can tell you, having worked in Congress, that there is a lot of fraud and abuse, and that there's a spending to be cut. But I think I was in Congress during COVID when Congress passed multiple times the largest spending bills in the country's history. A program that at first seemed good, the PPP program, I mean, it reached almost $1 trillion in spending. I have never lost more faith in a spending program in this government to see how much abuse and fraud took place there. But there are decisions and votes that happen every day where if we had a Congress that was really focused on serving and representing the people, we would not waste that money because we pay for it.
Okay.